Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Pulse. Actor, musician, voice of video games, super villain in some of the, like a little bit of everything. Ben Barnes joins us. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me.
Does it feel weird hearing all of those things describing you?
I never really considered myself to be any kind of multi-hyphenate. I mean, starting out in my career, I never thought I would do even one of those things.
You've played a lot of different roles with a lot of different accents.
Yeah.
Is that even hard to do?
It's interesting. Initially, I had a bit of imposter syndrome about it because the first few roles that I got cast in, especially the sort of first big role that I got was in the Narnia franchise movies, and I did a sort of Spanish / Italian / slightly made up Mediterranean accent in that film, and I thought, oh well, they've only cast me because I have this facility with doing voices and doing accents. Am I a good actor, or can I just do silly voices? Because the next movie I did, I played a Russian character, right. And then I was doing all these different accents, and I felt like I was just sort of an accent, like an impressionist almost, rather than a proper actor. It took me a good few roles of playing Brits and Americans in a role before I kind of let go of that feeling. And so then actually it was very weird for me when I went back to the UK and I did a show on the BBC.
Right.
And I did
how do I do this accent?
Yeah, I did a British accent, and I sort of couldn't quite figure out how to do it because I couldn't figure out how to sit comfortably in my own voice and be someone else.
This is actually me.
Yeah, exactly.
And
sometimes it's useful to have
time.
something to hang your hat on, as it were, like an accent or a walk or a coat, something that you can start with as a character. And an accent for me very quickly became that thing. So then when it was taken away, I didn't really know where to start.
Take us back a little bit, because we know about a lot of the things that you've done now, and Chronicles of Narnia and Westworld and all of these various things.
Yeah.
But going back, it was music that initially is what you wanted to do? Like, what were the early years?
I would say the first kind of foray into doing anything entertainment connected, I was probably a teenager. I played the drums with my school jazz band, and I just loved being in the music department of my school. It was like my happy place, and so I was trying to think of any way to kind of connect my life to music. Mm-hmm. And then somebody came to my school from this youth theatre company and saw, I think, a concert of ours or a play that we'd done at the school, and asked me if I wanted to audition for this company. And I just kind of caught this bug of wanting to kind of pursue this thing. And but initially, you're right. Initially, I was actually signed to a music management company, 90 Management, who created the Spice Girls. It was a big company, and I was recording jazz, a sort of jazz record with this company, but it sort of fell apart weeks after it begun, really, and I was very disillusioned with that part of things. And then I got a job doing a play, and then I got a job in a movie. The music was really the first love, but it felt like a kind of untouchable industry to me. I just had no idea how it worked, whereas with acting I was like, well, you audition for a role and you either get it or you don't. It felt very clear and honest in some ways. But now that I've kind of been able 20 years later to kind of dip my toe in these musical waters, I realize it's actually the other way around. The music is a really kind of supportive industry. Like, people tend to do favors for each other and play on each other's songs and help push each other, because it is such a hard industry to get a foothold in. Mm-hmm. That I've found that almost everyone I've met in the industry is really celebrating that that's what they're doing with their lives.
You knew you wanted to do entertainment, or you just kind of fell into that too? Because you weren't growing up.
I'd been doing these plays with music in my teens, and I thought, telling stories, acting, singing, doing music, it all felt like one mode of entertainment and one mode of storytelling to me. So I never really separated them. I think over the course of my career, I've also played a lot of musicians in movies. I've sung on a lot of soundtracks, and I've kind of been able to infuse my acting career with music. But it wasn't until my late 30s that I really made any categorical, honest attempt to release my own music.
And listening to you tell the story, these things just kind of fell into place. I was doing some acting. I tried the music. I didn't really like the direction of the industry. So then I get cast in some of the biggest films with cult following of all time. And after I do that for a while, this is my summary.
Let's not like rose tint everything. I think the music thing just purely, I was dropped after several weeks. It just did not work.
Okay.
It was the same week that the very first Pop Idol, which eventually became American Idol, or whatever. Yeah. It was the very first one of those. So that ages me. Yeah, it was. They decided that Jazz Week was going to be great on this show, and the songs I've been recording were just given over to these contestants on this show, and we were done.
Wow.
It was certainly a very kind of bleak and direct look into the sort of vortex of how cold the industry could be. And look, I over the last 20 years, there are literally thousands of acting jobs that I've gone in and done the dance in front of people and done the scenes, and you're just given a very cold no and no reason why. So I think along the way, there's definitely been...
Those aren't in your bio.
Yeah, good point. That's a very good point.
Forget about that. Nobody cares about the stuff you didn't get. Let's list all of the things that you did.
Let's celebrate the things that went right.
One after the other. That's the story.
Yeah. That's true, but I do think it is important to acknowledge the other side of it, because, you know,
it's work.
There's no kind of knowing what it feels like to celebrate a win if you don't know what a loss feels like.
Next, Ben Barnes talks about the butterflies that he still gets while performing live.
Of course, you get nervous when you're standing in front of 1,000, 2,000 people. And
you still do?
Yeah.
One of the things, I guess, that drove you back to music and wanting to do the music is your voice.
I think probably as you get older, as a person, you start to think about, for me anyway, I think it was honestly the scare was when the pandemic hit, like it was, I think, for a lot of people in different ways, to try new things, and it released us from all the comforts that we had in our life and all the things we had to look forward to in the short term. And I definitely projected forward to, you know, an 80-year-old version of myself looking back on my life thinking, you really never found the courage to do music? Okay. Wow, I'm disappointed in you. Do you know what I mean? And I thought, from that perspective, what am I waiting for? Even though I was playing, you know, villains in fantasy shows, you know, swishing my cloak around, I was still looking for ways to sew pieces of myself and my ideologies into these characters, and going to the showrunners and saying, what if I said this line like this? And I realized what I'm trying to do is like garner some control and try to tell stories in my way, when actually it's not my story, this one. Right. So, and really the only solution to that is to start with a blank piece of paper and tell your own
story.
And that's kind of scary sometimes, especially for actors who, I think for a lot of us, it's very comfortable to hide behind someone else's words, someone else's costume.
We've had several people on who have talked about that scenario, and they were, I guess, so good at the role, or people associated them with the role. Like, we've had people who were getting slapped in airports, you know, or people who were getting kind of yelled at for things that their character did.
The other thing that no one ever really gets into is, like, actors watch stuff too, and so when I watch TV shows, I associate them with the characters that I've watched them play, right, and I've loved them as, and if they've been heroes, I kind of am slightly in awe, and if they're kind of often playing like twisted Machiavellian characters, I kind of have an element of distrust. Like, we're all susceptible to that same kind of judgment. And I think recently for me, I've probably played 5 or 6 years worth of, you know, villains and psychos, and I was like, oh wow, it's really important for me to tell my like agenting team, need to play a guy that you're rooting for next, because that's important to me in life, to like for that not to necessarily be the whole legacy. It's fun to be the bad guy, and it's fun to like play the villain, and as an actor that's a really fun task. But I did start, as I said, you're thinking about looking back at it all, and you want some balance in that as well, I think.
Don't want to get slapped in airports.
Like once every 3 times.
These villains, these characters, the darkness playing the role, that seems to be almost the exact opposite of what you're expressing with your music.
Yes.
So tell us about, you've done the acting, you'll continue to do the acting.
Yes, sir. Now
kind of doing the music. This is you've done music before, but this is your first album. It's your first big tour.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so what's that been like so far, and kind of inspired that whole journey?
It's been wonderful. I've been surrounded by incredible musicians who I'm just completely in awe of. I had the support of actually two of the band members of Maroon 5 played on the record, and one of them produced the record, and I wrote one song with the both of them as well. And so I felt this kind of level of support, and so I felt like the confidence to be able to kind of like take it on the road. And of course, like, of course you get nervous when you're standing in front of 1,000, 2,000 people. And
you still do?
Yeah, because it's kind of new territory for me to like sing songs that I wrote in my living room, or while I was away on set in an apartment in Hungary, after the end of a long day of villainy, and then to be singing them for people, and for people to be finding their own stories in words that you wrote about yourself or people that you care about is such a fascinating thing to me. When I hear Prince sing about "I just want to give you my extra time and my kiss," like I'm not thinking, I wonder who he wrote that about. I'm thinking, well, who do I want to give my extra time to?
That seems like that would be much harder, because you can separate yourself from the statements, positive or negative, if you're playing a role. But this is you.
Yes.
So everything, the love, I'd imagine, has to feel better. If there's been any critique, I wonder if that is kind of reflection also, because it's like, this really is me.
The way that it works in terms of the way that we share music, it tends to find people that gravitate towards it. You take a chance on a movie in the cinema, in the movie theater, or you take a chance on a movie on Netflix or Amazon, and if you don't love it at the end, you turn it off and you go, I didn't love that movie. Did you? No, me neither. And you go to bed. Whereas with music, if you're not into it after 30 seconds, you'll change to something else. So it really does only find people that like it, and you're certainly not going to go buy a ticket for a show for something that you don't, that you're not
spend good money to come criticize
a little bit into.
This.
So it's kind of curious from that perspective. If they like a song, they'll scream at the end of it. You know what I mean? It's so immediate. Whereas when you're on a set, you're toiling away for months in the middle of nowhere usually, and then a year later it comes out and people watch it in their own homes, and sometimes people come up to you and tell you what they thought about it, but generally they just say, oh, I saw you in this.
Coming up next, Ben talks about why it's so important to him that he writes his own songs.
I think I like to think of myself as a very hopeful person, and so I find that a lot of my songs feel like they're about hope.
Where the Light Gets In has all kinds of meaning in the title. There's even meaning to the album cover.
Yeah.
What do you hope people get out of this album and this tour?
I mean, I think I found myself writing songs about feeling kind of lovable for who you are and who you've become through whatever it is that you've been through. I think I like to think of myself as a very hopeful person, and so I find that a lot of my songs feel like they're about hope. I kind of hope people can find their own stories in my songs, and feel like that those stories are valid, and that we're all kind of connected, like we all feel feelings the same way. In terms of the shows, I want people to kind of dance out of the doors smiling, so I put a lot of fun and showmanship into into the live shows, because you don't want to. You don't want to kind of slink out the doors at the end of a show, looking at your shoes, wondering what your life is about. You want some pep in your step at the end of a live show. I think a lot of the songs are about kind of feeling like you are more worthwhile because of everything that has happened to you, and that was the idea behind the album cover. There's the Japanese art of kintsugi, which is if something ceramic like a bowl breaks, it can be fixed using gold. Mm-hmm. And thereby, making the thing more precious than it was before it was broken. Like, it's important to know what a dark day feels like to feel a really joyful one. And also, I happen to have played characters in the last couple of shows that I've done, and people kind of like, it's a curious fact that I played a show on Marvel's The Punisher, mm-hmm. and also on this Netflix fantasy show called Shadow and Bone, both of which characters got pretty bad facial scarring in the second season, which is like a very curious thing to happen to you twice. I had this slight sort of nod to that by having facial scarring on the cover of my own album, because that's sort of like my version of it now, rather than someone else's. Is
there anything else on the bucket list? Like, what's next? Is it more music, more acting?
There are new things all the time. I think I sung one of the songs on a sort of morning show the other day, which is something that was completely new for me. I think it is kind of important doing any kind of creative work to try and scare yourself a little bit.
Okay.
To like push yourself to try new things. Because I think most of the time, hopefully, you won't regret it. It didn't go very well out of interest. Just curiously, it did.
But the morning
one, yeah, it didn't.
So we have a rule that we don't generally ask people to sing first thing in the morning.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
There's a lot that goes into
especially
that.
When they were still singing, late last night.
Right. I mean, I'm sitting here drinking tea and I'm just talking.
Yes.
This morning.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
We'll chalk that one up.
Yeah.
It's another thing we don't put on the bio.
Also, I don't know why people do this, but why bands sleep on buses that are moving overnight and then try and sing again? I don't recommend it.
Your tour manager's here. We should. Let's not do that.
I know. I don't know how many. Well, I'm not driving, but how many hours I've slept in the last 3 weeks is definitely less than any other time in my life.
But these are fun. These are new experiences.
Exactly. No, I agree.
So we got movies, we got music. Who knows is kind of the answer. What the next thing that scares you will be the next challenge you take on.
The truth is, I still have such a giddy, kid-like approach and attitude to all of this stuff that, whenever I get a script sent in, whether it's like gunfighting action or whether it's like, passionate kind of romantic story, I get equally excited about stuff because I watch a lot of shows and movies. And so just the idea that I still get to do that for a living and play those kind of characters is so thrilling.
So we ask everybody the same question. Okay. When you hear that phrase, use your voice for good, what does it mean to you?
I think it kind of encapsulates everything that we've really been kind of speaking about, especially if you're lucky enough to have some kind of platform where even if a handful of people will listen to what you have to say on a certain subject, to kind of encapsulate it in a sort of pithy single sentence that works, because I think it's like you've tripped me a bit with that question, and I'm going to blame not sleeping on the bus.
Listen,
not having a good answer to that.
What does the phrase "use your voice for good" mean to you?
It means everything.
Guys, thanks so much for watching another episode of The Pulse, today with actor and musician Ben Barnes, and a really cool story of just his desire to try different things, his willingness to get out there, his need to share his voice, even as he was having an amazingly successful acting career. Just a good dude. I hope you enjoyed it, and I leave you today, as I always do, reminding you whenever you can, use your voice for good and have a good one.
I had no idea what to say at the end there.